Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio, where today we're going to be talking about chords and arpeggios. What's the difference between a chord and arpeggio in terms of the music theory and in terms of the practicalities, how you play them and whatnot. This kind of came about because of a tutorial I did recently where I was doing a tutorial about chords and I mentioned putting PhatPhish into arpeggio mode so you could see where the notes were, and somebody said, well, why arpeggio mode, why not chord mode, what's the difference and so on. So basically in music we have scales, we have arrangements of notes, a series of notes with some sort of formula, like a major scale. And we can take the notes from a scale and we can arrange them in a particular order, and that gives us a chord. So we could take the first degree, the third degree and the fifth degree out of that C major scale, put them together and we get something that looks like this, which you recognise as a C major chord. And that's a chord, an arrangement of notes from a scale with some sort of relationship between them. An arpeggio is basically the notes of a chord but played individually rather than strummed as a single unit. So that is a chord, and that is an arpeggio. That's the difference. The difference between an arpeggio and a chord is to do with the way that it's played. If it's played all as one unit, it's a chord. If the same notes are played sequentially, melodically, then it's an arpeggio. So with that in mind, let's think a little bit about how we would use chords and how we would use arpeggios. I suppose the obvious place to start is thinking about using chords as part of like rhythm guitar playing, where you're providing an accompaniment by playing chords as like strummed groups of notes, like basic stuff. You've done that before. But you can also arpeggiate those chords, if you like. So you're working with basic chord shapes, but rather than strumming the notes, you're going to arpeggiate the chord by playing individual notes from the chord. And playing chords like that as either straight chords or arpeggiated chords, both of those are useful in terms of playing like an accompaniment type of thing. Let's think now a bit more about lead playing and using arpeggios as part of a lead line. Now, if you've been playing lead lines and improvising and so on, you're probably familiar with the idea of working over the top of a chord progression by playing notes from a scale. Rather than just viewing the scale as a whole, though, you can think about using arpeggios. Still, as a starting point, let's think about using diatonic things. So you're only going to use arpeggios with notes that belong to the key. I think about using arpeggios as part of your lead line over the top of a chord progression. Now, if you come along to arpeggios with like a chord mentality, you'll think about chords as boxes, shapes like that, or like that, or like that. But it's better to kind of open your mind up a little bit and think about the arpeggios, just a series of notes that are available right the way across the neck. So if we have PhatPhish in arpeggio mode and dial in a C major or 7th arpeggio, we can see that the notes of arpeggio are all over the neck like this. And based on that, we can come up with patterns where we can come up with shapes that we can use more in a melodic context than in a rhythm context. You could get a shape that looks a little bit like this. Now that looks kind of spread out, but it actually lends itself really well to like what's called a sweep picking technique. Now I don't intend to turn this into a tutorial about sweep picking, but looking at this shape, it is a shape that lends itself quite well to playing like lots of sequential downstrokes or sequential upstrokes, and using this in a lead context. There's like an arpeggio pattern, C major arpeggio right the way across all 6 strings. And if you look at arpeggios that are available within a key, you can find fingerings for those. And it's a bit like learning chords. There's only certain ones that you need to know. If you're playing in a major context, you'll have major shapes, minor shapes, and diminished shapes. Or if you go major 7, minor 7, dominant 7th, and half diminished 7th shapes that you can apply from different root notes depending on what key you're playing in and whatnot. So there we're looking at a big arpeggio pattern across all 6 strings. You don't have to use such big patterns. You can use smaller units just across, say, 3 strings or something. Something that I use quite a lot is just arpeggio patterns on the top 3 strings, and use these in my lead playing. Things like this. It's important though when you're playing arpeggios that you can still hear each note individually, so the notes are being played in sequence rather than being played simultaneously as if you were strumming it. That's important, so especially if you're playing arpeggio patterns where you've got a group of sequential downstrokes or sequential upstrokes. You still allow each note to ring out as a unit in its own right rather than simply strumming. So it's just taking like a simple major arpeggio on the top 3 strings here. If I play that really fast, you can still hear the notes ringing out individually, as opposed to just strumming the notes and basically that becoming a chord again rather than an arpeggio. So when you incorporate arpeggios into your lead playing, it opens up a whole load of new possibilities. It's useful as well to think about this with your music theory head on as well. Think about chords, the notes in the underlying chord, and think about the notes in the arpeggio you're playing over the top, and kind of how they mesh together and what that actually gives you. So if, say for argument's sake, you're playing over the top of a C major 7 chord, where we've got C, E, G and B, and then over the top of that you play a D minor 7 arpeggio. Think about the notes you've got there. You've got a C and a D and an E and an F and a G and an A and a B. So you've got all 7 notes there. So actually what you've got is a C major 13 chord. The whole thing comes together to give you a C major 13 chord. So thinking about the relationships between the underlying chords and the arpeggios, and think, oh, well, actually what does that give me? Or sort of going at it from another angle, to think about what sort of chordal sound do I want to hear. So if you thought, well, I want to hear the sound of I wanted to hear the sound of a C major 13 chord, but all I've got in the rhythm part is a C major 7. What notes do I need to add to that chord to give me a C major 13 type of sound? And then work that out and say, well, the notes that are missing are the notes of the D minor 7 arpeggio, and you can then play that over the top to give you the sound that you're after. We started this talking about chords and the way you would use them more in like an accompaniment sort of context, and being able to arpeggiate those chords to make your accompaniment patterns sound more interesting. But chords, or the notes from chords, when you play them as arpeggios, can form a useful part in your lead playing. So take some time to experiment with those and think about the music theory and so on. If you're comfortable with the idea of chord construction and scales and so on, you shouldn't have too much difficulty getting your head around the theory side of all of this. And if you want to take it even further, why not think about incorporating chords into your lead playing? That's something else you might want to experiment with. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please click like, subscribe, etc., comment, all the various options that YouTube gives you down there. And if you've got a suggestion for a future video, or you want to ask me a question, then you can go here and submit your question, and I'll try and address it in a future video. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video next time. Bye for now.